Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Hello, put a hi in the chat box if you can see and hear me. Welcome back to another very interesting session of Insights with Upgrad. And today we have a very special guest with us, all the way from East Coast. Is that right, Cheng?
Yes, almost. I'm in Central Time, so I'm actually in
Okay,
Dallas, Texas right now, but really close, though, really close.
got it. So thank you so much for taking time out, Cheng, and for all people who are joining in. I'll allow you to join in slowly. All right, is it the weekend already? We usually have people joining in bang on time. We've got to wait some
Mhm.
time. Put a hi in the chat box if you can see and hear me. All right. Yes, thank you, Oduntan, for I see you're enjoying our webinar series, is it? Uh, I saw that hi yesterday as well. That's great to know. So welcome. Thank you for taking time out for today's session. Glad to know you're liking it. And very quickly, before I move on to introduce the speaker for the day, I would like to understand from you what where in your work experience life are you? Are you are you the young professional or the one who's been there, done that, tried it out? And what's the outcome you're expecting from today's session so that it helps Cheng slightly make it more personalized for all of you? All right, the older age group today, Cheng, if you can see the response of the poll question, and they're trying to understand how they can build their career, or they want to learn more about Upgrad's product management programs. That's great to know from you guys. I will move on to introducing Cheng, the speaker for the day, and then allow him to start with the presentation. So Cheng Han has recently worked as a senior product manager at Amazon in the AWS Learning Products Group. He was responsible for defining product strategies and roadmaps for learning products ranging from AWS MOOC offerings to product features for the AWS Learning Management System. Before Amazon, Cheng Han worked as a product manager at Microsoft, Udacity, Upgrad, where he has worked in various projects ranging from Windows 8 to online learning programs. Thank you so much, Cheng, for taking time out today and for addressing all our excited learners who want to learn more about Agile product management. So you can take it on from here.
Sounds great. So let me share my screen here with everyone so I can share the slides with you all. The slides I will be presenting later today. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my presentation here.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So hi, everyone. I'm Chen Han. I'm excited to be talking to you all about. But before going to the presentation itself, when I introduce myself to people for the first time, a lot of them have a hard time pronouncing my name. So what I tell people is my name is a combination of two famous folks. One is Jackie Chan, the famous Hong Kong movie star who used to do a lot of martial arts movies, and Han Solo from Star Wars. And if you combine their name together, Jackie Chan Han Solo, that middle part, Chen Han, that's how you would pronounce my name. And I'm very excited to be talking to you all today about Agile product management. And just to give you a little overview of what I will be discussing today, first of all, I would like to kind of share a little bit more about my background, my experiences with you all, so you would understand who am I and what am I speaking to you today about Agile product management. But before going to Agile product management, there's a few context, a few stories I need to tell to help you understand how do we go from a very traditional way of building software products to this more Agile approach that I'm going to speak with you about today. And then at the very end, I would help you understand how does a product manager function in this new agile format, and how is that different from a more traditional approach, and how is that different than the traditional way of how product managers used to work in software product development. So with that said, a little bit about my background. Thank you, Meha, for kind of providing a brief intro to my background. So just to tell you a little bit more, to elaborate a little bit more about my experiences. I started off as a computer scientist. I studied computer science in school, in both college and grad school, but I realized, hey, I'm not really that good of a software developer. Writing software that may take my colleague or my coworker, a day, it may take me 2-3 days. But I realized in the process of building software in a college or collegiate environment, I really enjoy working with people. I really like bringing people together and help them arrive at the ultimate vision that of the product or the software or the project that we want to build. And that's what I really enjoyed. And that's how I became interested in product management. So with that said, my first job out of school, I joined Microsoft as a program manager, which is like a product manager everywhere else. And I was one of the many thousands of people that worked on Windows 8, and I'm not giving away a little of my age as Windows 8 many years ago. But after my days at Microsoft, I joined Udacity to work on online education. I was a graduate teaching assistant when I was in grad school, and I really enjoyed the experience that I had when I was teaching people. And this was around 2012 when MOOCs was all the rage. And I thought this is a great opportunity to really combine what I love, which is teaching, as well as what I'm good at, which is technology and computer science related topics. And then so I joined Udacity. I built a bunch of online courses. I worked on a nano degree, and I took my expertise and experiences from Udacity and actually joined Upgrad 2-3 years ago. And then worked on various online courses and online learning programs at Upgrad as well. And then very recently, I did a little transition. I moved to Amazon, where I worked in the Amazon Web Services group, where I was responsible for what's called learning products, but it's a really fancy way of saying education materials. Could be MOOC courses that were released on Coursera, or courses that were released on AWS's own internal learning platform to defining product features for AWS's learning management system. And throughout all of this, I have had the opportunity to work at big companies like Microsoft, Amazon, see how product management is done at these big companies to smaller companies like Udacity and Upgrad, see how product management is done at smaller startups. So I'm very happy to share my experiences with you all today. And with that said, I'm going to then transition into the meat of the presentation, which is product management and how software products are being built nowadays. But before going to creating software products, I think a lot of us need to kind of table set, make sure that we're not all on the same page regarding how do we go about building software products. For those who may not have experiences building software products, they may think it's very simple. Someone comes up with the idea, you do some simple analysis, and then the developers get to work their magic, and sometime down the road, a few months or a few years down the road, some magical software products appear out of the thin air. But like I mentioned here, is it really that simple? And the answer is no. This reminds me of an image or meme that I saw on the internet a few years ago, where someone says, hey, how do you draw an owl? You draw a couple circles, and then you draw the rest of the owl. And as you can see here, there's quite a few steps missing in the process of drawing an owl. And similarly to the picture that I showed you earlier, or the slide I showed you earlier, there's a lot more steps in the process of building a software product. And before going to the more agile way of software development, we need to first discuss how we used to build software back in the good old days. And by the good old days, I mean 15, 20, 30 years ago. And if we list out all the steps of software development, as you can see, there's quite a bit of steps involved. You go from gathering requirements, you do an analysis of what needs to be built, how many resources you need, how much time you need to then actually designing the program, building the software, and then testing it, and then releasing to your customer. And in the ideal world, you would do each step by step in a very cascading manner here. So you would start with system requirements, then to software requirements, to analysis, and so on and so forth. And if there's any issues, you can very easily go back to the previous step and fix any issues that you may not have foreseen or forecasted. And then at the very end, once you measure out and define everything that needs to be done, you figure out all the resources, time, and manpower, and in terms of budget. And then hopefully you will create a nice fancy Gantt chart that you will showcase to your colleagues, your software engineering managers, or your manager, or the team lead, or the organization VP, and say, hey, we got everything figured out. And if we follow the process or the chart listed here, we will get the product built on time, on schedule, and on budget according to everything laid out here. But I want to ask everyone here, is it really that simple? Are there any issues that you can foresee with the process I just described earlier? And the answer is yes, there are a lot of issues and a lot of problems that can potentially happen with what I just described earlier. First of all, no, we as human beings, we're not very good at estimating things. How many of you have tried to start on a personal project or a home renovation where you say, well, this will take a week, and the next thing you know is winter of next year and the project or the home renovation is not done. Just to share an example with you, my manager at Amazon has been trying to renovate her house for 2 years now, and she's still not done, and she still has the kitchen, she still has the bathroom that is yet to be completely renovated. And with that said, just to give you a little more clarity into all the potential issues that we may potentially run into with the old traditional processes, imagine if one goes through developing the software and everything seems to work just fine, from system requirements to software requirements and so on and so forth to testing. And then we tested the product and we realized, oh no, something did not go according to plan. We realized something was wrong with the program design. And something wrong with the program design means we have to alter the software requirements. And by altering the software requirements, we realize there's potentially some feature or product that we can no longer build or build to our original vision. And what do we do? Can we make the changes necessary to incorporate the new learnings that we found? And the problem is with this traditional process, or what's called a waterfall process, it becomes very difficult. Because in a waterfall process, it's very iterative. You do step A, step B, step C, step D, step E, and so on and so forth, with the hope that each step will be completed according to schedule, according to time, according to budget, and according to the original vision that you have. And if what you are building were not built according to the vision, the budget, the timeline that we have, then things get thrown into the haywire. It's like you were trying to build a very nice Lego model and someone takes that and just swung through the Lego model and all your pieces are out thrown all across the floor, and the plan and the vision that you had is now incomplete. And now you are not going to be able to build the project or the software project that you originally had envisioned. Or in order to make those changes, now you have to add additional timeline or additional budget or additional headcount to the project so you can build the software product that you have in mind. And how many of you had the experience of being very excited for a software product back in the good old days, and then only to see a news announcement or a news article saying, oh, by the way, this new product is now delayed next quarter or even next year, or God forbid, it's going to be all canceled altogether. And many a times is due to this very inflexible, this very iterative process that we as product managers and we as product development teams will follow. So with that said, a lot of smart people got together And they sat down and said, well, is there a different way to build a software product? How can we do things differently so we can potentially fix all the problems that we have been facing with product development or software product development that we have seen over the years? And with that came what's called the Agile approach. And the whole idea with Agile, Agile is actually, let me take a step back. Agile is very simple in theory, but it can be very complex. A lot of people can tell you the ins and outs of Agile and will take many, many years. And in this presentation, my goal is not to go into the nuts and bolts of Agile and how Agile is being practiced and being implemented in companies worldwide, but my job right now, or my goal right now, is to help you understand what is Agile on a very high level and how it solves the challenges that I mentioned earlier, and to speak to how it solves the challenges that I mentioned earlier. Agile comes to product management with a very different perspective. Rather than trying to plan out everything all at once at the start of the project development and laid out very nice completed or nice forecast steps of what we need to do, Agile instead, it wants to build software products with small incremental releases. So what does that mean? So if you will allow me to go back to this picture here, in traditional product development, when we would go through all the steps here and release the final product at its final form all at once. So when we release Windows 8 or Windows 10 or whatever Windows version is right now all at once without releasing beta or alpha versions to the customers and get feedback. But let me forward to the Agile approach to software development. Instead of releasing the product in its final form, when we release incremental versions of the product to the customers and then get feedback, and then based on the feedback, and when we refine our product development plan and then release it again to the customers and get more feedback. And with each small incremental release, we will get closer and closer to the final vision or the final version of the product that we want to build and release to the customers. And within each sprint, rather than say spending months or even years building a product, each sprint is typically measured in terms of days or weeks. In a typical Agile environment, a sprint is 2 weeks. Versus, to give you a comparison, when I was at Windows, we follow a more waterfall approach where each sprint or each period is measured in terms of quarters, so 3 months. So as you can see, in an Agile process, you release software in terms of weeks versus in a waterfall process where you will release software in terms of months or quarters or even years. So why would we want to release software more quickly? It's so that we can get more feedback from the customer more quickly, so we can potentially react to issues or comments or recommendations from customers that we did not foresee in the original planning or the original roadmapping or strategy that we had defined for the product that we want to build. And so with that said, a way that I would compare and contrast this Agile approach to the waterfall or the traditional approach I mentioned earlier is, in a waterfall approach, it's almost like you're driving the Titanic. It's very hard to make changes or to make adjustments when you realize something is wrong. Similar to how the Titanic, when it saw an iceberg coming its way, it was very difficult for it to make the changes that it needed to get out of the way of the iceberg. But with an Agile approach, it's almost like you're driving a small boat. You can go left, you can go right, you can go forward, you can go backward very easily. So you can adjust to unforeseen circumstances that you did not plan for, or to adjust to feedback or recommendation from the customers that you did not uncover the first time you spoke to the customers. And from that perspective, that is the main benefit of Agile. It allows you to stay more nimble. So you can potentially adjust to things that you do not foresee or plan for, which is especially useful if you are planning a new product or you're trying to build something you have never built before. And with that said, there are a lot of different flavors of Agile. There's Scrum, there's Kanban, Crystal, and more. And this may sound like random words, but I promise you, these are all actual applications or actual methodologies of Scrum. Actual methodologies of Agile, and they are all variously applied by various companies. But nowadays, Scrum is probably the more popular or the more frequently used version of Agile nowadays. And like I mentioned earlier, this presentation is not to dive into the specifics of Agile or the different flavors of Agile. It's to really provide you with the overall benefits of Agile. So with that said, to say Agile, it's not process or to follow a methodology like a religion, but it's to really try and follow these what's called 12 Agile principles. These are the principles defined by the initial creators of Agile. They sat together, they looked at what's wrong with the old way of building software products, and they tried to then solve those problems by saying, hey, if we can meet these 12 Agile principles, then you are practicing Agile. But without going to the specifics of each principle listed here, there's a lot of them. There's a few that I want to call out, which are the benefits I have mentioned earlier, actually. One is to release software continuously, so we can get feedback from the customers as quickly as we can. And as we are releasing software often, as the first bullet point mentioned, we are gonna see a lot of requirement changes based on feedback from the customers or things that we did not foresee. And then we're gonna stay nimble and we're gonna requirements versus in a waterfall way where requirements are going to be hard to change. And third bullet point, something I mentioned earlier as well, in Agile, we are not going to release software in quarters or even years. We're going to try and release them as frequently as we can. So then we can then or to uncover things that we do not foresee as quickly as we can. And this is something that we'll discuss later when I discuss Agile product management, is rather than throwing a big chunk of product requirement document to the development team and say, hey, I wrote you this 40-page document, now you go figure it out. We're going to go the opposite way. We're going to write lightweight documents, but rather than communicate through documents or product requirement documents, we're gonna try to meet as often as we can so we can discuss in person. As you know, as we all know, especially those who have many years of working experiences in this presentation, communicating through text form like emails or docs is never as easy or as efficient as talking face to face. So with that said, I want to then make a slight transition to the next point. How does product management now work in an Agile? How has this shift from a waterfall or traditional approach of product development affect product management? So then just to kind of share my experiences with you, when I was at Microsoft, I hope you can see my notes perfectly here. But when I was at Microsoft, we follow a more waterfall approach where we release software very iteratively, very similar to the processes that you see here and the process that I showed you earlier. But something that is not shown here is the product manager would talk to the customers, talk to the stakeholders, stakeholders meaning internal stakeholders like leaders within the company or customers that will be using the product or customers that will be buying the product to really figure out what this product should entail. And when we write this, called 6-pagers, but in reality, it's more like 30, 40 pages of all the details that the software development team needs to know in order to build a product. And when we throw it over the wall to the software product development team and say, hey, by the way, here's everything you need to know about the software or the feature that you need to build, and go build it. And then I'll come check in with you, every once in a while, or come talk to me at some point. But after the product requirement document came off the software development team, I don't have a lot of insights into what they do. It's almost like being siloed out. I'll give you updates every once in a while, or the product development team would come to me and say, hey, by the way, gentlemen, your PRD, this may not work, or hey, I have this question about the PRD that you wrote here. Can you clarify this? But other than that, I don't get a lot of insights into what's going on with their day-to-day progress or how the product development process is going. But in the Agile approach, rather than building this really heavyweight 40-page product requirement documentation and throw it over the wall to the development team and say, by the way, now it's your problem and come talk to me when they have issues. In this more Agile approach, rather than building this heavyweight PRD, you would go with what's called a product backlog, meaning that from the PRD that you have written as a product manager, you would then come up with a roadmap of the features that you need to build and the order that the product development team should build in, and the priority of these features. And from that roadmap, you will write what's called stories or user stories, where you would describe the features from a user's perspective. And that's where the product backlog comes in. And then what you would do is, rather than throwing the user stories to the product development team and kind of clean your hands and say, hey, I'm done, now it's your problem, you will actually have usually daily or at the very least a weekly meeting with your team to discuss within the team between yourself as the product manager and the development team, hey, from this product backlog, what should we work on next? What should we build next? And how we want to prioritize. And then with that said, now you have this more clear communication with your product development team, where you get to have daily or weekly communication, where now you're more involved in the product development and product planning process versus the good old days where you write very heavy product requirement documents that's 40 pages, throw it over the wall, and then say, hey, by the way, it's not my problem anymore, and you get filed out. In a new way, you have this very interconnected relationship with your development team. And the benefit here is now, as a product manager, you have a voice, you have an opportunity to argue on behalf of your customer or your stakeholder how the product should be built. And then additionally, you have insights into the process or the progress on how the product is built based on these daily or weekly communications that you have with your team week to week. And in addition to the benefits that I mentioned earlier, as a product manager in this more agile cycle or this agile approach, you have an opportunity to present the software that you're building to your customers more quickly so you can get feedback more quickly. Versus, say, imagine you're building Windows 8 like I was at the time. We're not releasing Windows 8 until 2 years into the process before beta is out. Whereas in the agile approach, we release in software. Remember, we want to release software as quickly as possible, usually on a weekly cycle. Now you can take pieces or iterations of the software, go to your customer and get feedback, and then adjust your product planning or product backlog accordingly. And now, rather than waiting 2 years to get feedback from your customer and say, hey, by the way, what do you think? And the customer tell you, nope, actually, this is not what I want. You get an opportunity to present your iterative version of your product to customers more frequently, so you can get feedback more frequently, so you can then adjust and be more nimble in your product development. So with that said, that's really a big benefit of agile product management versus the traditional product management. And with that said, as an agile product manager, one of the things that you need to be better at versus traditional product management is you have to be a better program or / project manager. And that's with a caveat. I'm speaking in a company where the product manager has to take on program management-like position. In smaller companies, this is usually the case. But as an agile product manager, not only do you have to figure out the product strategy and the product vision, you need to also work closely with the team on program management to ensure that the right pieces of the product is being built on time and on budget and according to the original vision. Where versus traditional product management, you write a big PRD story over the wall and the software development manager takes over in terms of the development process of the product. And in addition to that, I think as an agile product manager, someone who works closely with the engineering team or software development team, now I think you also have to be from my experience, a little more technical than you would in a traditional project management fashion, because now you have to speak more regularly and more often to your software development team. And from my experience as a product manager who works closely with software development teams, they will respect you more if you are more technical. And by technical, I don't mean that you have to be able to program or code or build software. But at the very least, you should have an understanding of the domain that you're working in, and you're able to speak the language of the domain. The worst thing that can happen to you as a product manager is the software developer company say, hey, product manager X, I have this technical question. What do you think? And then you just kind of have this blank look in your face. You're like, I don't really know what you're saying to me right now. And when that happens, you will have lost the respect of your development team, and they will very likely to not talk to you very often. So as an agile product manager who works very closely with your development team, it's very important for you to be able to speak their language, because you will be speaking to them very often on a daily basis or even on a weekly basis versus say, bi-weekly or monthly basis, like in a traditional product management fashion. And lastly, I think as an agile product manager, I think one of the additional benefits or something you have to be better at is managing the expectation of the customers, as you would be working more closely with customers in an agile fashion, because you would be releasing iterative versions of your product to your customers to get their feedback. So setting expectation, doing user research, user testing, that becomes a more important part of an agile product manager's toolbox. Not to say that's not important for a traditional product manager, but just that as an agile product manager, you would be interacting with the customers more often. And therefore, you would be practicing those skills more than say if you're working a more waterfall, a more traditional software development process. But with that said, I want to say that, hey, there is really no right way or wrong way of building products or software products. I've mentioned a lot of bad things or all the things that can go wrong with a traditional way of building software products. But there is still a place in this world for waterfall process to building software products. And there is the right place and the right situation for going with a more agile approach. And it really is up to you and your team to use the right approach for the right project. And just like the adage says, use the right tool for the right job. And in your situation, you have to use the right framework or the right approach for the right way of building your project or your software project. Just to briefly share my experience, waterfall approach works great when you have built something over and over again. You can very quickly forecast the risk, the timeline, and budget with high level of accuracy, so you can do the high level planning that you need to do for a waterfall approach. And when you have that kind of insight, that kind of experience, waterfall is great. It's like a well or a machine when you can do waterfall, right? Everyone knows ahead of time, and they know when they need to meet that timeline deadline. Versus when you do agile, one of the things I want to mention about agile is there's really no hard deadline. You keep on going through your agile development cycle until you have built the right product for your customer or when the customer is happy. So when your product manager or when your boss or your VP comes to say, "Chen, I need to get something done by October 10th," then agile may not be the right approach, because deadline is something that agile is kind of allergic to. So with that said, back to what I mentioned earlier, there is really no silver bullet to building software products on time and on schedule. You really have to use the right framework and the right approach for the right type of project. So with that said, I'm gonna stop here really quickly and see if there are any questions or comments from the audience. Happy to discuss things that I said about product development and how a product manager functions in the agile world, or talk about how you can get into product management and how to prepare your transition from, say, your current role into product management, or anything that's on your mind.
Thanks so much for the beautiful presentation. This was very insightful. We already have one question from Mubarak. Please let me know how you get insights on identifying problem in product management.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think that is one of the most important part of being a product manager, is making sure that you are solving the right problem, or as you have mentioned, identifying the right problem. And typically there's three components to identifying the problem in product management. First, you need to do a little bit of mathematics. You understand your domain, your space, the industry trends within the domain and the space. So that's one factor that you need to take into account when identifying the problem. Another factor is doing your competitive analysis, understanding what your competitors are doing, but with the caveat that you should not solely focus on your competitors. Rather, you should focus on your customers, your users, which I'll come back to in a second. One thing when you used to say in Amazon is we are customer focused, we're never competitor focused. But it's important to stay competitor aware, meaning we need to be aware of what the competitor is doing, know what kind of products they're offering, what kind of features they're offering, what kind of strategy they're taking. But we should not aim to be like our competitor. We should aim to please our customers, which leads me to another factor you need to consider when it comes to figure out the right problem is talk to your users, identify who is your primary audience, who is your primary persona, who's your secondary persona, what problems do they have, how can you solve those problems, what is their user journey when they're trying to do something. And from there, lastly, you should also then talk to your internal stakeholders, the VPs, the directors in your company, understanding what is the company trying to accomplish and what is the business objectives that they want to achieve. And once you have all those information, you snap them together and you do some kind of synthesize. It's kind of like cooking. You have all these ingredients, you scramble them together. And then you then try to synthesize a common theme or common thread or multiple common themes and common threads. And that is the problem that you need to, and that's how you would go about identifying problems of the product manager. And not just identify problems, identify the right problems to solve this problem. So hopefully that's also what answers the question you had.
That Arundan has a question on what are the necessary skills needed by a product manager.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. I think if you talk to 10 product managers, you probably get 10 different answers. So I'll offer you my perspective. First of all, as a product manager, the most important thing is to be strategic. Because as the product manager, you are a leader for a product or a feature within a product or a suite of products. And you need to make sure that you're leading your team towards the right solution or the right direction. And in order to arrive at the right solution or right direction, you have to think through all the potential priorities, needs, use cases, problems that can go wrong, and try to kind of synthesize them into a coherent framework or strategy. So being strategic and being able to think things through step A, step B, step C, step D, and so on and so forth is one of the key skills of the product manager. The second, I would say, the second key skill that product manager needs to have is being empathetic. Because as a product manager, you are here to solve the need of someone. And that someone could be a customer, an end user, or that problem could be, or that someone could be someone within the company where we need to increase, say, the revenue of the company, or we need to expand to a new market. But ultimately, you are trying to solve the problem of someone. And in order to solve that problem, you need to be empathetic. You need to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the person with the problem to see from their perspective, what is the problem? So you can then deeply understand the issue and then apply what I mentioned earlier about doing your macro analysis, competitor analysis, user research, and so on and so forth to arrive at the solution. But without being able to be empathetic and see the problem from the perspective of the user or the person with the problem, you will not be a very good product manager. So second key skill is being empathetic. Third skill that I want to mention, it could be seen a little different way. Someone will say communication, someone will say leading with an authority. But from my perspective, how do you influence and impact people's decision making with an authority? Because product manager may sound fancy, right? You have this manager word in your title, or if you go read some random blog post, they'll say, oh, product manager is like the CEO of a product. But Unlike a manager, a person manager, or a people manager, or unlike CEO, you can't tell people what to do. You're not their boss. You don't write their performance reviews. You don't write your developers' performance reviews. You don't write your user research performance reviews. You don't get to tell them to do what you want them to do. So you need to have the key communication skill, the key resolution solving skill, the key ability to impact and influence people to get them to do things that you want them to do. So being able to impact and influence people without authority is another key skill that product manager needs to have. And with that said, I want to share an anecdote that I was given when I first became a program manager at Microsoft. I had one-on-one with my skip level manager. So my manager's manager, he was a group product manager at Microsoft, so fairly senior. He had over 20 years of experience working at Microsoft at the time. And the first advice that he gave me was, being a product manager is like being a cat herder. Cats are not going to listen to what you want them to do, right? But you still need to figure out a way for them to go the direction or do the things that you want them to do. So being able to impact and influence people's decision making without authority is a key skill to being a product manager. And the last thing I want to leave with you is having domain expertise. And that's with the caveat of you applying to a more senior product management position. If you are a fresh out of school grad and you are getting that first product management role, then it's okay to have no domain expertise. The company will train you, they know you graduate from college or grad school, you don't have a lot of industry experience. But if you're someone that's more experienced, it's important for you to have a key, you have that domain expertise, because like I mentioned earlier, your software development team will come look to you for direction and to help them overcome some kind of conflict or make some kind of key decision. And if they talk to you about something that they're facing within the domain that you're working in, and you have this glazed look over your eye, you're like, oh, I don't understand what you just said to me. I feel like just bookmarking to me. They will lose respect for you and your ability very quickly. And once they lose respect for you, or they lose trust in your judgment, it affects your ability to impact and influence their decision making without authority. So that's often the point I want to leave you with, is being able, having some domain expertise, not necessarily technical expertise, but having some domain expertise, I think, is another key component of being a good product manager. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks for such a detailed answer. And for actually putting it down in points. That was really helpful, and I hope that answered your question. I don't see any other open questions here. Would look forward to some more questions from the attendees today. Until then, let me answer one question which I saw in the chat box. I think Suresh was asking if we at Upgrad offer programs in product management. We do. I have shared the link on the chat with you, and do feel free to check it out. There's multiple modules which are comprising the whole program. Agile is one of the modules that we cover, and there's, I think, everything that Chang mentioned today, right? From I think the last answer that he gave, right? How do you empathize people also is a part of the soft skills that we help you with, understanding the whole role. I mean, the role as a whole, instead of just learning, okay, what's UI UX, and what's prototyping, how do you go about consumer research, right? Other than that, there's this entire soft skills component along with the job that comes with it. So yeah, that's also covered as a part of the course. Thanks, Aruntan. Look forward to having you here with for other sessions. Do let us know which is the program you like the most, and what other courses would you maybe like trying out with Upgrad. Also, if you just want to try out a free course that we have, do feel free to try out our free courses in case you're already pursuing other programs, right, which are more time intensive. So if you'd like to start with maybe a product management free course at Upgrad, maybe you can try that out as well. I see one question on chat. Can you elaborate about the program details? Right. So if you click on the link that I've shared in the chat, you'll see that the program is offered in partnership with Duke CE, which ranks number 3 in the US. The program is about the duration of 6 months. You've got the option to actually go through multiple live projects through which are inculcated as a part of the program. There's I think about 19 tools that you learn in the whole of the duration of the program, and you learn from the best industry mentors. There's going to be live sessions which are also incorporated on the weekends, so that you just don't have to study, in a recorded only format. It's a very beautiful blended learning format, where there's components of both recorded sessions and live sessions. I think the highlight of the whole thing is that we have a new batch starting on the 30th of September, and that should give you a global experience. That's because we have experts coming in from all across the world trying to tell you more about the industry in that particular region. So depending on where you're from, you have experts from the region that you belong to. Uh, and uh, and I think that's what is something which is really special. The whole course has been designed keeping in mind, I think, 0 to 4 years and 4 to 8 years of work experience folks, and trying to really accelerate their careers or help them transition. There's also various components of career assistance in the form of mock interviews, in the form of CV building workshops, or just one-to-one mentorship sessions that you need from career experts. There is a job portal that Upgrad has, and you can try looking up on the job portal for opportunities that are open. Other than that, what Upgrad courses help you with is the fact that there's this whole alumni network that you can tap into, right? Imagine the number of people who must have pursued a, a brilliant program from Duke CE, and that opens up multiple avenues for you across the globe. So what you're tapping into is the network. Mm, how about certificates, specializations? The specializations are add-on if you'd like to do. It increases the duration of the course, and you keep getting certificates for the different specializations that you pursue. All right. I think that answered almost all the questions you asked me in the chat. And one question, I think, Cheng, from you, since nobody else is asking right now, what are some of the challenges that people can expect in the interviews, right? Being some questions being asked, because most of the people who attend our webinars for product management as a domain, the 2 top companies that they would like to join are Amazon or Microsoft, based on a survey we took recently. So, I mean, since I think you're best of both worlds, what can you recommend about that?
Right, definitely. I think in terms of interviews, there's a lot of resources online really available, and also books you can purchase. But I would say generally there's 3 categories of questions that you may have to prepare for. So one is what's called product sense. They would give you an open-ended question on how you would improve a product, and it's for you to be able to, like I mentioned earlier, drill down to the right problem that needs to be solved or needs to be completed in order to arrive at this improvement that they're looking for the product. So product sense is number 1. 2 is being able to also discuss metrics and numbers, or in the context, how would you improve some number or metrics for a product? Because as a product manager, your job is not only release and build products, but also maintain and improve the usage or the adoption of the product. So they would give you a mock scenario saying, hey, we have this feature and this metric has either increased or decreased by X%. How would you go about diving into the underlying issue that is causing the increase or decrease? I think that's the second type of question that you need to answer. And third question, the third type of answer they would typically ask is soft skills. How are you in terms of working with people, especially engineers or technical folks? Because as a product manager, Your job is to work with a lot of people. You are like a conductor in the orchestra. You work with all types of folks from all across the company. And therefore, you need to have very good interpersonal skills. So they will ask you about certain situations about, for example, when a conflict arises between you and the engineer or between you and someone else on the team. How would you go about resolving these kind of issues? So software skills, or not software skills, soft skills is another type of question they will ask you. So just to quickly recap product sense, how you would go about building a new feature or build a feature to improve a product, metrics and numbers. How would you go about identifying the underlying cause for an increase in the metrics for a product or a decrease for the metric in the product? And then how you would deal with certain interpersonal scenarios that you may face as a product manager working in the company.
Interesting. So, I mean, there's 3 parts to it, right? I mean, that could be carried out in different rounds, or it could be asked in the same round of your interview, right?
Right. So typically at a bigger company, I would say my experience also, when I was at Amazon, I was also on the interview in the end. I was not only the person that went an interview towards the end of my stay at Amazon. I actually interviewed about 30 candidates that wanted to be senior product managers at Amazon. So the overall process is you will typically go through an initial round with an HR person, or I'm sorry, not HR, but a recruiter. So they will get to know about you, your experiences, and see if there's a mutual fit. If there is, you would typically then go through either 1 or 2 rounds of phone interview with someone on the team or the team manager. If you really knock it out of the park in the first phone interview, then you don't need to go through the second phone interview. But if there's some questions, some doubts about, maybe there's some skills that we didn't really get to discuss or get to poke, then there will be a second phone interviewer that will call you to ask about these additional things that they would like to better understand about you. And if you pass the phone interviews, then they would typically fly you to the company's corporate headquarters office, and then you will do an on-site, and that is typically 5 rounds of interviews. So you would meet with 5 different people discussing various aspects of product management, from how you would deal with product management scenarios like product sense, product metrics, to software, software-like personal skill problems, that interpersonal situations that you may be placed in as a product manager. And here's one trick I would tell you: if you are interviewing at Microsoft, they will cut you short if they don't like you. So if you made it to the 3rd interview and to the lunch, and the recruiter comes back and tells you, "Oh, hey, went down for the day. Oh, by the way, sorry, the next recruiter is busy. He or she cannot talk to you." That means you probably didn't do very well in the interview, and you probably didn't pass. They don't do that at Amazon, but they will do that at Microsoft. So an FYI tip for you if you get to interview at Microsoft.
That's insider insider tip. Okay, that's great to know. So it's pretty rigorous then by the way you're defining it. So for somebody who isn't a product manager, say I'm currently a strategy manager, right? Now I if I want to transition, is it a good thing that I start with courses like upgrad? Because all the companies try to look at some projects that you've done, right? It's a catch-22,
Right.
where they're like, you show me some experience to get experience in the same field. So is it a good point to start with courses so that you can do some live projects with courses like these?
Definitely, I would highly recommend for people product management to join an online course where you can build up your portfolio, things that you can showcase to catch the attention of people that's hiring product managers, be a recruiter or a hiring manager. Specifically, since if you don't have any previous product management background, they may not be able to really understand your potential or your skills that you can bring to a product management position. And therefore, by building that portfolio, you can showcase and say, hey, I have the potential, I have the ability to do things that a product manager would do. So I highly recommend someone joining a program or joining a course where they can have an opportunity to build real world like projects that mimic what a product manager would do in the real world.
And some of the things that you should do alongside is, do you join like Slack, Discord communities? Are there some that
Mhm.
you'd like to recommend?
Right. So let's say if you're working at a current company and you realize, hey, like you are a user experience or developer, you realize product management is something I want to try or something I aspire to do, then you can potentially take on product management like responsibilities at your current role, where you get to participate in writing up a strategy alongside a product manager for a new product they want to build, or if you work in an agile environment, you can take a product owner role where you get to work with the software development team and managing and prioritizing what features or what product we get to build next. So you get to participate in some form of fashion on projects or roles that would give you some flavor or some ability to showcase to someone within the company, say, hey, I can do something related to product management. Maybe I have the potential to take on product management as a full-time role. So in addition to take a course, build up your portfolio, if you're working at a current company, definitely take on projects or roles where it would give you the opportunity to learn or do or take on some responsibilities that a product manager will undertake. So to showcase to a hiring manager or someone on another team, for example, product team lead, say, hey, I have done all these things that's very similar to what a product manager would do. Would you be open to me moving to your team as a full-time product manager so I can continue to refine my skills?
I think that's a great idea, and I think intercompany transfers are so much more easier. One, because
Mm-hmm.
people know you, you've got a working relationship, and there's always room for trying things out in your company, and then taking it to the next level. I mean, that also acts as testing waters, right? Okay, what is it like to
Mm-hmm.
work as a product manager? That's great. So would you recommend that there be people looking at very specific, like, I mean, Agile is a format, right? It's a technique that
Mm-hmm.
people would use. But then there's different segments in product management. There's growth, there's acquisitions, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
multiple more bifurcations. So should somebody looking forward to building a career, like a long-term career in product management, start with the functional areas of product management,
Mm-hmm.
or you start big and then you narrow down?
Right. I would say if you are someone new with no prior product management experience, want to break into product management, I would say take whatever product management job you can get your hands on. Unfortunately, product management has a high bar of entry nowadays versus say 20 years ago, due to the fact that product management is being hyped as you are the CEO of a product. Everyone wants to be a CEO of a product, right? CEO sounds fancy. So there's a lot of people coming to product management. And therefore, with that said, the bar has been raised to getting your foot in the door. But once you get your foot in the door, it's easy to transition to whatever type of PM you want to become. You could be a growth PM, you could be a data science PM, you can be a mobile PM, and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. So with that said, to answer your question, I would not suggest looking for a specific segment of product management yet if you're new in your career as a product manager. Just try to get your foot in the door into product management. Once you get your foot in the door, then look into specializing and build up your expertise in some specific domain that is interesting to you.
Got it. That was helpful. I see Suresh's question, where do you get to work? I think in industry projects and assignment section on the page that I've shared, you can just refer to that. You'll see all the projects that will be included as a part of the program. All right. Great. Any last closing tips, since we're almost at the closing of the session?
Yeah, so I want to wish everyone here the best of luck in terms of becoming product managers. I'm sure with a lot of the hard work, with a lot of perseverance, all of you can become a product manager at some really great company down the road. And I look forward to having you as my product manager peers, sometime maybe a few months or a few years down the road. And you can tell me and say, hello, John, I saw you at this webinar a few years back, and I'd love to say hi to you as well.
That's such a nice closing note. Thank you for that. And very quickly, help us understand, how did you like the session? Just 3 buttons that you have to click here. All of you who stayed with us through the program, do feel free to write to us at admissions@upgrad.com for any questions you have, or any any counseling sessions you'd like to have from our program counselors who can help guide you with the best programs that'll help propel your career, because Upgrad is all about being your career partner and helping you upskill. All right, so Chang, that was great. It was great having you here, and if you see the results, there's an amazing yes from all who would like to keep attending webinars like these, and they loved the topic that you covered.
That's awesome. And hopefully you'll be able to learn more things about product management in future webinars from Upgrad to everyone who answered here.
Absolutely. So do write to us at admissions@upgrad.com for more information on anything you'd like, particularly, and have a good day, a good evening. Thank you so much, Chang.
Thank you as well. Have a good evening to you, and a good day or good evening to everyone who attended. Very nice to meet you all.